again. Thank you all for joining us at Shropshire Libraries for this author event with Diana Rosie. We're very happy to welcome her this evening. She's a Shropshire author, and here we are to talk about the inspiration behind her novels and her journey from copywriter to published author. We're going to hear about her writing process in historical fiction, and we will, as I say, follow this with a question and answer. Diana's debut novel, Alberto's Lost Birthday, was named Amazon's Rising Stars of 2016, and also of that same year, W.H. Smith's Fresh Talent in the autumn. This book's set in Spain, and it tells the story of an old man orphaned during the Spanish Civil War, and the story includes his grandson. Alberto has never had a birthday, never received a present, and his grandson is determined to change this. The story follows each of Alberto's birthday and leads the pair into Spain's troubled past. Recommended by Radio 3 listeners as one of their favourite short novels and selected as a top-notch title for Shropshire Libraries. This certainly is an accolade, we feel. So the long-awaited second novel, Pippo and Clara, has just been published in hardback. And this one is set during Mussolini's dictatorship. And the powerful novel tells the story of a family and country divided. So may I please give a very warm welcome to Diana, and thank you for joining us tonight. And Sinead, over to you.
That's lovely. Thank you, Ronnie. Thank you. Yeah, welcome, Diana, to our virtual author event. Now, having read and thoroughly enjoyed both of your historical novels, I'm really interested to find out more about you, about how you became a writer, the inspiration behind your novels, and to discuss maybe more generally the genre of historical fiction, and to hear what you're up to at the moment. So I've got a long list of questions for you, but we are going to hear an extract from your novel as well, and we are also very keen to involve our audience this evening. So we are hoping to devote maybe the last 20 to 25 minutes to audience questions, and we already have had some submitted via email that we'll put to you as well. Okay, so I think we'll start off with your background. Okay, who is Diana Rosie? So could you tell us a little bit about yourself that we maybe haven't heard from Ronnie just now? Where you grew up, what were you like at school? I mean, maybe Mr. Kane can answer that one. How your career progressed. Tell us all.
Okay. Well, firstly, thank you very much for having me. It's a real privilege to be doing this with the library, because I have a great love for all of the Shropshire libraries. And thank you everyone for coming. It's absolutely fantastic to see so many numbers of participants. A little daunting, but so about me. Happy childhood, mum, dad, brother, sister, dog, that sort of thing. I'd say school pretty average, you know, B, C grades all the way along. When I was quite young, an English teacher put in my report that I wrote interesting stories, but I never picked up on that, and it never occurred to me to be a writer. I never wanted to be. But probably the most interesting thing about my childhood was that I grew up in Hong Kong, which meant that I travelled extensively through Asia. But the long summer holidays, generally, we came back to the UK, and then we went to Spain, and we had about a month in a villa in Spain. And it was definitely that inspired my first book, meeting an elderly gardener who didn't know when his birthday was. As a 7-year-old, that was huge.
Mm.
So that's a little nugget of a story that's always stayed with me. But like I say, I've never thought about being a writer. I went to art school. I went into advertising, and really it was only because I couldn't really find the right job as an art director in advertising that I ended up being a copywriter, which now I'm really grateful for, because I've learned a lot about writing, and that I really enjoy writing through working in advertising. It's probably also worth mentioning, now Mr. Kane is here, that I didn't want to do English A-level. I wanted to do biology, but I couldn't because I was doing history and art. So I did English, and thank goodness for teachers like Mr. Kane, because there was definitely a love for books that started there.
Yeah.
So yes, that's the background.
Interesting. So when was it that you decided to write a book? So your career is as a copywriter. Was it a big step to author? I mean, because you are writing.
There's a bit of a joke in advertising that every copywriter really wants to be an author, but I really didn't, and I always feel dreadful that all these people dream of being an author, and I never did, but I've ended up doing it. No, I got made redundant. That was the main thing. When the crash happened in, when was it, 2010, 2011, I found myself without a job. And I thought, what can I do with my time that is free, that doesn't involve going out and spending money? I was living in London, so walking out the door is expensive there. And so I thought, well, I'll start writing a book. And once I started, that was it. I couldn't stop. So then I got work, so I kind of had to stop, because you have to throw all your energies back into work, don't you?
Okay, so how did the publication of your first book come about?
It was a very long process. If anyone is out there thinking about getting published, it is very, very difficult. I was lucky enough to come across a website by HarperCollins, which was called Autonomy. Unfortunately, it's not going anymore. But it was peer review. So you posted some of your book and other people would come and comment on it. And so you got an idea of if it was any good or not. So I did that, and a lot of people seemed to like it. And in fact, one friend that I made on that suggested that I talk to her agent. And I did, and she was interested, and it wasn't finished then. She said, go away and finish it. So I finished it, and then another part of the website was that it was a competitive side where you had to try and get in the top 5 of all the thousands of books. And if you got in the top 5, you got a review by a HarperCollins editor. So it took a really long time. Must have been the best part of a year just to get in that top 5. But I did, and then it was a good few months before I got the review. But amazingly, the editor who reviewed it was half Spanish, and the book was set in Spain about Spanish. So he knew about it. He really enjoyed it. He wrote some very lovely things about the prose, and some sort of comparison with Hemingway, which I still don't really get, but it was an amazing review. He said, I'm going to take it to the next editorial meeting and suggest that we publish it. And I thought, well, I'm not going to hang around for that. So I then wrote to a whole bunch of agents and said, I might have this book deal. Do you think I need an agent? And then the phone started ringing and the emails came in. And after a couple of nice lunches, I chose an agent who's also called Diana. And then together we sort of set off on this journey. In the end, HarperCollins said no, it wasn't for them. Bloomsbury said maybe. Another one, can't remember. Another one of the big ones said maybe. And then it sort of limped on for a bit. It took, again, months and months and months. And then Pan Macmillan came and said, we're interested. Mantle is an imprint of Pan Macmillan. And that was it. I met my lovely editor, and we took it from there. So that's how I was published.
Wow. And am I right in thinking it was a 2-book deal, was it? That you
That's
kept
right,
doing?
yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And funnily enough, I had, you know, it all happened quite quickly after going for years with nothing happening. Then it was kind of like, right, it's a 2-book deal. What's your other book? And so I sort of wrote a paragraph of, well, it's something about this.
Yeah.
And when it came to write it, I did write a book, but I didn't like it. And I sent it in and I said, I don't really like it. And they said, let's see if we can fix it. No, it's not quite working. And in the meantime, I had this other idea about 2 children separated. And I said, can I write this? And they said, yes. And they've been happy with it. So, and it feels like a progression. The writing feels like it's getting better and the books are working a bit harder. So,
Yeah.
so yes, I really have written 3 books, but only 2 of them were.
Yeah. Oh, do you think you'll ever go back to that? Well, what
I think
was
there
the
might,
second one?
yeah, I think there might be things in it. I think the actual story is not quite right, but there might be sort of nuggets to take out of it to use.
Okay.
Who knows?
Yeah. Interesting. So, which writers inspire you?
Well, going back to the olden days, as our kids call it, you know, when I was in my 20s, I'd say Graham Greene. I was a big fan of his, John Steinbeck, that sort of thing. Now I really like John Boyne. I think his writing, you know, the Boy in the Striped Pajamas, The Heart's Invisible Furies, that's a wonderful book. That's the sort of thing I would aspire to. And the likes of Hamlet, beautiful writing as well.
Yeah. Okay. So, what are you actually reading at the moment?
I actually don't do a lot of reading, but I do listen to audiobooks. Life is very busy. I work from home, so there's no commute. I've got 2 little kids, so when I get into bed, I crash. So when I take the dog for a walk, I listen to audiobooks. And I've just today finished Himself by Jess Kidd.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Have you read it?
Yes. Yeah.
Good, isn't it?
Oh, fantastic. Yeah. Absolutely. Oh, okay, that's interesting. No, I love an audiobook as well. I mean, for a long car journey, there's nothing better than starting.
Just doing the cleaning around the house, doing a bit of baking or something, stick the headphones on. Yeah, it's great.
Oh, fantastic. Okay, so we'll move on and look at your 2 novels. So obviously your first novel was Alberto's Lost Birthday. This is the paperback version. So published in 2016. There's some lovely reviews of this that I've read on Amazon, on Goodreads. But I thought that there's just a sentence on the back of the book: moving, thoughtful, and absorbing. I would agree with all three adjectives there. That was fantastic. I reread it. I told Diana this earlier. I reread it. It was yesterday. I finished it, and I was in tears once again. Even though I knew what happened. It was fantastic. Love your writing. So could you just tell us a little bit about it and the story and the inspiration behind the story?
Well, the inspiration was this elderly gardener who, like I say, when you're 7 years old, not knowing when your birthday is just seemed like such an incredible story. And it just always stayed with me. And so this isn't his story. It was just that sort of nugget was that I based it on. But yes, Alberto is an old man, and he tells his grandson that he doesn't know when his birthday is, and his grandson says, well, we're going to go and find it. And so they travel back in time through the years, really, but to a time when the Spanish Civil War was beginning and in progress. And so it's a voyage of discovery for Alberto to go looking for his birthday, but it's told in a sort of, it's a bit like a dual narrative where the story carries on sort of in the present tense, following the old man and as they go on this search, but it also, alternate chapters are told from the point of view of different characters who knew Alberto as a little boy, and so you discover his history through those voices. So yes, that's it. I won't tell you the ending. Well, you know the ending. Whether he finds his birthday or not.
away. So how long did it take you to write the story?
Well, like I say, I started writing and I probably did the first 5 chapters in, I don't know, a couple of months maybe. But then life got in the way and it sort of dragged on a bit. It probably took me about 9 months to write it, but with a lot of stopping and starting. I mean, when I actually sit down and write, it's really fast. I can just tap away and you know, a chapter's done. So yeah, if I get the time and the inclination, then it's quite easy.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm intrigued about the design of the book cover. So you had actually had a different cover for the
So yeah, the hardback was a big lemon.
Okay.
Which has some relevance in the story. It's interesting because they, you know, the publisher said, "Is there anything, you know, that's inspiring you or that you want to comment about before we do the design?" And I said, "Well, the only thing I don't want is 2 characters walking off into the distance in silhouette, because it seems to be on all the books." And then there's an
I just took a look at this and I was like, hang on a minute.
Look at this. But I think what happens is it works. There's a lot of conversations with the booksellers, so Waterstones, you know, they'll go with front covers to Waterstones and say, "What do you think of this?" Because they will say, "Well, this will, you know, this will entice people. This, you know, not so much." So everything is taken into account. With that, I really like this one, I have to say. I like its simplicity. But I like the oranges and yellows, you know, the sort of Spanish colours of the paperback.
But you get the final say about the cover then?
Kind of. If I really hated it, then you know, I'm sure it would be taken into account. Yeah. I didn't really hate it, like I said, I really like the lemon.
Excellent. Okay, so 5 years later came your second novel, Hippo and Clara. And it was actually...
I do really like the cover. Sorry to interrupt, but I do like the cover of that one, because it's got the Italian flag. If you turn it over, it's got the green of the Italian. No, keep going. Yeah.
So yeah, so that one came out in hardback during lockdown 3, wasn't it, in February of this year, and you got and I sort of read a nice quote from the author of The Librarian of Auschwitz, yeah, who called it a powerful story, sweetly told, which I thought was really lovely. So can you then give us an insight into the story behind this novel?
Well, he also picked up on the fact that there's a library in the story, which I know makes you happy too. Because libraries are really important. So the story about Pippo and Clara, it actually came from an A-level history class. So you see, A-levels really have an impact on you, don't they? We were doing history between the wars, and we had a lesson about politics of it, and the teacher drew a line and she sort of said, you know, well, you've got fascism over here, you've got communism over here, and here's everything in between. And I remember thinking at the time, because, you know, when we started learning about Stalin and about Hitler and Mussolini, they just seemed so, you know, bonkers in their craze for power and control of everything. And to me, it almost made a circle rather than just a straight line, that you know, they almost come back to each other. So there was a thought there, and I thought, well, what if 2 children were separated? One turns left and ends up with a left-wing family. One turns right and ends up with a right-wing family. And then I started to think, well, where would that be best suited? And Italy did have this sort of this dichotomy that I thought I could really work with. So the story is 2 children wake up in the morning, their mother's disappeared. The little girl goes down the steps of the house looking for her, turns right. The little boy, looking for his mama and his sister, goes downstairs, turns left. So he ends up with a communist family. Clara ends up with a fascist family. And the story is them looking for each other during the build up to the war, the occupation, the sort of civil war that followed, and how they're constantly looking for each other while the world sort of falls apart around them.
Okay, so I believe we're going to now hear a short extract from the novel,
Right,
which
okay, so
nicely sets the scene for the whole story, doesn't it, really, and introduces us to the character of Pippo.
Pippo, yeah. So, Pippo, 1938. Pippo turns left. Pippo's mother always said that chattering birds like him talked from the moment they woke up. To prove her right, every morning as he squirmed and squinted from his slumber, he would croak with a sleepy voice, "Buongiorno a tutti. How did you sleep? I slept very well." Whatever they were doing, Mama and Clara would reply cheerfully, "Buongiorno, little bird." So it was that day. The boy writhed in his blanket and with half a yawn called out, "Good morning, everyone." But no one responded. He tried again, rubbing his eyes with the palms of his hands. "Buongiorno a tutti." Silence replied. He sat up and looked around a room he'd never seen before. He remembered that Mama and Clara and he had come to a new city after traveling for days. They'd arrived late last night, and he had sat with Clara until his mama had carried him and the heavy bags up the flight of stairs. His eyes had already been shutting as she pulled a blanket from the bundle of that his sister carried, piled it on the floor, and he gratefully climbed in. It was morning now, but the room was grey and empty. No Mama, no Clara. Twisting the red fabric band around his wrist, he called to his mother in a dry rasp, "Mama, Mama, Mama!" He listened for a moment but heard no response. He kneeled on the blanket but didn't dare step out of its island of safety. "Clara, Clara," he called. He waited, but there was no reply. The silence made his tummy flip over in fear. They wouldn't have left him alone, would they? "Where could they have gone?" he asked out loud, frightened, but finding courage in the sound of his own voice. Without waiting for a reply, he said, "Maybe they are out buying breakfast. I hope so. I'm very hungry. Pippo's hungry, Mama." When he stopped to listen for a response, at first all he heard was the unsettling silence. But then other sounds began to appear to him. Doors banging, children crying, women shouting. He listened for Mama's voice, but it wasn't there. "I don't understand," he said aloud, twisting the band on his wrist. "Usually when I wake up, Clara is in bed beside me. Mama always appears, it seems, a moment after I open my eyes with a drink. And Clara and I sip the hot milk with a splash of coffee for flavour, Mama says." The sound of his voice echoed in the empty room. People always said he talked too much, that he was never quiet, that he twittered like an opinionated little bird. But Mama said she liked nothing better than to wake to the sound of a happy sparrow telling her all about his day. "And on special days," he continues his monologue, "Mama makes hot chocolate. I have seen Mama make it. She grates a piece of chocolate into the hot milk and stirs it. It is delicious," he told the empty room, his eyes alight at the memory. "And when you get to the bottom of the cup, there are tiny lumps of chocolate, and me and my sister use our fingers to eat them. Yum." The thought of it made Pippo's eyes tingle with tears. Annoyed, he shook his head to dispel the fear and climbed out of the blanket. "I will go out and find Mama and Clara," he announced to no one.
Brilliant. And so it begins. That's brilliant. Now we actually do have a question from an audience member that was submitted earlier today that specifically about Pippo and Clara. It's from Gwen. So good evening, Gwen. Pippo and Clara seem most suited to the family which adopts them in terms of their inclinations and aptitude. Did you have this in mind from the outset, or did this develop as you wrote the novel?
No, I didn't have that in my mind. I knew the characters, so perhaps maybe on another level I was making them go to the right families. I knew that I wanted Pippo to be bubbly and fun and noisy and a proper little boy, and I knew Clara should be more thoughtful and reserved. But perhaps those characteristics are more are brought out more as you're writing about the family that they end up with. So maybe yes and no. Maybe it was sort of, no, I didn't think about it, but yes, it probably came along as I carried on writing. But
Yeah.
brilliant question.
Yeah, it is, isn't it? And then a further question really is, had it been the other way round, you know, could you see the outcome of the novel being completely different?
That's really hard. I suppose no, it would have been the same. Would have been the same, but different because of who they are.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we can't talk about this novel without me mentioning Clara's love for the library. She talks about enjoying the cool, calm peacefulness of the library, which I think we can all relate to. And as she explores the books, you know, she discovers more about Italy's history than she has ever done at school. And I get the feeling that you are, you know, quite a champion of libraries. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but have they played a prominent role in your life?
It's interesting. I remember school libraries. I don't remember going to libraries, but I do remember school libraries. I wouldn't ever say I was the world's biggest reader. I'm still not, but I know the value of books, and I think modern libraries today just offer so much. You know, I have taken my children to Rhyme Time, and I've taken them to choose books, and I love the fact that, you know, it's so interactive. They get a book with stickers, and the more books they get out, the more stickers I think that's wonderful. I used to, until lockdown, I was going to a writing group, which was brilliant, absolutely brilliant to meet other writers. So there's so much to a library, especially now. And look at this, look at how fantastic this is. And the events that you guys have organised for in real life as well are all fantastic ways for authors to meet people. I think people tend to think that, you know, all we care about is selling books, but we want people to read our books. And so a library is just as good as a bookshop for me.
Fantastic.
My answer?
My answer, yeah, well done. I'll pay you later. So we've got a question here, and I think this is from Heather, who works for Shropshire Libraries. It's not made clear in which Italian city the book takes place. Did you have somewhere specific in mind?
No, I kind of made a point with both books to not set them in a place, partly because I don't want the distraction of, you know, where exactly is it, and oh, I've been there or I haven't been there, partly because, you know, there are people alive who lived through these times, and who am I, you know, little writer from England, to say exactly how it was for them. So I've kind of avoided that. In terms of a city, I had Naples in my mind, but in terms of an area, it was more Tuscany. If you look at the sort of the history and the timeline and what happened when, it was more sort of centre part of it. And the food as well, because food in books is important to me, and I wanted to get the sort of region, so I chose a region. I was like, right, okay, the food is going to be right for that region. So an Italian, or people who really know the area might spot that.
Yeah. Well, interestingly enough, my husband's grandma is Italian. Her name is Philomena.
Oh, really?
Like Philomena in your book. Really? And I can remember her making gnocchi, and it reminded me of her so much when you brought Philomena into the book as well. Yeah. So
well, my husband knows an Italian family. When he was younger, he used to go there, and he learned how to cook from a nonna, and yeah, there's definitely a big influence of all kinds of food. And so to have all of that, but then say, right, imagine all of that in wartime, what would you do? And so doing all that research was really interesting. I like to read a lot of sort of first-hand experiences of what people were doing, and also there's all kinds of films as well. I do research quite visually, so I look at old photos and pictures, and I also end up on YouTube, and you know, you can fall down a real rabbit hole there. But you can end up watching a family on a farm, and the mum's cooking and the kids are, you know, what are they eating? And I find that absolutely fascinating, and so I'm desperate to put things like that in the book to get a real sense of what it's like.
Yeah, well, you've kind of neatly gone onto our next section of the interview, where we're going to discuss more generally historical fiction, because I think that's where your novels would lie in the historical fiction genre. Obviously, they explore the troubled times in Spain's past and in Italy's past. We've got the Spanish Civil War in Alberto's Lost Birthday. We've got wartime Italy, and the political tensions between the fascists and the communists in Pippo and Clara. So you've talked a little bit about the kind of research that you undertook. Now, do you do all that research before you put pen to paper, or how does it work?
In general, for the book, I think about an idea, and I get a sort of a, you know, beginning, a middle, and an end, and then I do a chapter outline. So each chapter will have maybe just a sentence, but basically what I want to achieve by the end of that chapter. And then I sit down and I write, and I have no idea who's going to say what, where everyone's going to go until I'm actually writing it. And so in terms of the history, I have to get that right quite early on. So I just do a timeline, right? Okay, when Clara does this is what's happening in the world. And when, you know, when Italy enters the war, right, this is going to happen and that's going to happen. So that's how I do the sort of general story, which can be a problem when you actually, you know, further down the line, when you've written it and you get to editing, and they say, oh, well, we need to change this, and it's like, oh no, because that's, you know, that affects that, and so that can be a problem. But in terms of the actual research, now, as I'm writing, I'll research about that particular pocket of history, and at the same time look up, you know, what were the uniforms, what would the food be, what was the rationing, that sort of thing. So I'm not a historian. It's something we were talking about before, that historical fiction is such a broad spectrum of novels that can be broken down. I mean, there are sort of historical mysteries, historical fantasies, all those subgenres, if you like. But you could measure it by time. So you've got, like we were saying, you've got novels that were set in the 60s that are classed as historical fiction, right back to your Clan of the Cave Bears, kind of, you know, caveman. But you've also got, I just made some notes here, place as well. So you've got 100 Years of Solitude set in Colombia. You've got Midnight's Children set in India. You've got Wild Swans set in China. They're all historical novels where we're learning about the history of a place. But for me, I think it's really interesting of how historical it is. So I think there's a very big difference between your Hilary Mantel's, Kate Moss, Ken Follett, people like that, who are, in my mind, they're historians who write amazing stories about the characters, or they find characters to put in the history that they know. And then, so the other end of the scale, you've got more authors like me. I mean, I was thinking about Gentlemen of Moscow. You know, for me, it's the storytelling, and like I did, you know, you find a place, a time and a place for that story. So Gentlemen of Moscow is a man in a prison. It's set in Russia at a time when, you know, everything is changing. Or even Hamlet, you know, it's a mother's grief and father's grief, and how they find their way back to it. It happens to be about Shakespeare. So I think that's a really interesting thing. And if I was in a book group, I would say, let's have a chat about that, because I'm really interested to see what people's opinions are about these things. I mean, I'm quite lucky in that my sort of book falls into a literary fiction genre as well, which I kind of think of as a book club book, which is what I would set out to try and write. The sort of thing that I like to read is what I like to write. But yeah, that's what I think about historical fiction.
No, that's brilliant. I imagine it's quite a difficult balance to make, is to how much history do I need to include in my novel? And
well, I tell you what, someone tells you, because I sometimes, oh, I've done all this research, and you write it all, and then the editor says, no, take it out. It's not relevant to the story. I want to know what's going to happen to these children, and I don't really need to know what's happening to Mussolini or whatever. So yeah, sometimes that happens, or sometimes they say, well, I don't really understand, what's going on at the same time. So there's a chance to build it in. And I watched some films, worth mentioning. I watched some films as well. My husband's a filmmaker, and the moment I said, right, it's Italy, right, okay, The Bicycle Thieves and Life is Beautiful and all of those films, it was a joy to sit down and watch them. Cinema Paradiso is our favourite anyway. So
okay. So which authors do you think write the most successful historical fiction? Have you got any particular favourites?
Well, like I say, I think they're all so different. Terrible name dropping here. I met Kate Moss at a party. I didn't recognise her. Everyone else was wearing name tags and she didn't. And I said, oh, you haven't got a name tag on? And she said, no, I don't really like them. And I said, oh, no, me neither. We should just introduce ourselves. And she said, yes, hello, I'm Kate Moss. And I went, oh. And she's absolutely lovely. So yes, maybe I should just put her on my list of favourite historical.
Fair enough. So we're gonna move on to your kind of creative process. You talk quite a lot about your writing process, but we did have another audience question from Stuart, which I thought would be a really good one for you. What were the challenges in writing a dual narrative running parallel with each other? And how did you manage to intertwine them so beautifully? I think he likes it.
Thank you very much. Well, it's kind of relevant in both books, because there is an alternative narrative in Alberto. But Pippo and Clara, it's one chapter for Pippo, one chapter for Clara, and vice versa, or it carries on like that. It's something that I'm really interested in. I'm very interested in the structure of a novel, and so I like to play with it. The characters have a different point of view. So Pippo is told in third person. So Pippo did this and he ran down the street, whereas Clara is told in first person. So I woke up in the morning and I had my breakfast. And there's a reason for that. And when you read it, you'll see what the reason. We hopefully figure out what the reason is. And I like that, playing with that, and I like to give myself more of a challenge, as if writing a book isn't enough. But I really enjoy that. It does get me in a terrible pickle, a real pickle, because especially if you have to change something in one, then it has a massive effect on the other. And because it's this timeline as well of things happening with the two characters, I have got in a bit of a pickle, and I've ended up writing in the wrong tense and things. So thank goodness for editors. That's all I can say.
So just thinking about where actually do you write? Where do you do your writing?
Anywhere I'm comfortable. I have done it sitting in bed, in the spare room, in the kitchen, in the dining room, anywhere really.
And do you write every day? Do you set yourself a word limit?
No, it's very haphazard. For this last book, it was a constant negotiation with my husband of who's going to look after the kids, so I can have a day to write. Okay, well, because we were both working, both work from home, so we would take turns, and I am terrible at just getting on with it. I will, find any bit of washing to do, or go and get some more biscuits. Oh, we've run out of biscuits, I better make some. So yes, it's not very well structured.
Okay, so we're getting to the last kind of 20 minutes of the evening. So I've got a few more questions to ask Diana, but if audience members would like to ask any questions, now's your time to pop them in the chat. I'll carry on with the questions. As I see other questions come up, we'll put those to Diana as well. So feel free to ask anything. How do you decide on character names, Diana?
There are some websites where you can look up what names were popular in a certain country on a certain day. So if you have a character who is 30, you go back 30 years and look them up. And it's all done alphabetically. Names it's one of the things that an editor will pick up on, because if you have too many characters whose name begin with P, it's confusing. This one sounds a bit like that, or that sort of thing. So no, that's how I find them. And now I'm aware of what the editors pick me up on. I'm kind of sort of managing that as I can. But yeah, it's really interesting. You know, you look up sort of popular baby names in 1900 or something. It's always interesting to see. Thank goodness for the internet, hey?
Yeah, no, definitely.
I would have definitely been down the library for quite a long time if I had to do all my search there.
Yeah. So can you ever see yourself writing a different genre of fiction?
I suppose the next thing to it would be a young adult book, possibly or probably historical fiction. One of the interesting things I found out was that Alberto's Lost Birthday is on an A-level reading list for students learning about Spanish Civil War, and I thought, well, that's quite a nice background. I mean, like I say, it's not history, it's not battles and stuff, but to get a sense of who were the main protagonists in the war and why it all started and how people felt about it. I was really chuffed with that.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic. And I have to say, after I read it, it prompted me to find out more, because I suddenly realized I was very ignorant about that period, to be honest. So yeah, it often leads to further research. So we're going to move on to your future plans, and actually there's a question come up in the chat from John, which was going to be my next question. What are you writing currently? Or are you working on
there's an idea bubbling away. It's at the point where I'm going to write the chapter outlines. I don't think I'm giving away too much when I say it's set at the end of the war, based at a crossroads, and it's people going home, all the different areas that they're going home from, the experiences they've had. But I don't know, because I had a 2-book deal. I've had my 2 books, so we need Pippo and Clara to do well so that I can hopefully get more books to write.
Yeah. So what happens now in terms of that? It's just a case of wait and see about the successes, and it will be out in paperback, won't it?
Yes, I'm not sure of the date. I have a feeling sometime in the summer, late summer. So it's out in audiobook, ebook, and hardback now. And the idea is to try and get to generate reviews, because a lot of books don't come out in hardback first. I think it's a Pam Macmillan thing that they really liked it. So to try and generate as many reviews as we can, hopefully positive reviews, so that when it comes out in paperback, if there's a bit more of a push, then people will go onto Goodreads or Amazon or whatever and say, oh, look, it looks quite interesting. And hopefully, fingers crossed, it will do all right.
So do you read all of the reviews?
Well, there's not that many. Yes, you know, if there were thousands of them, maybe not. But yes, no. Well, reviews are how we learn what we're getting right and what we're getting wrong. There's some reviews that I think have been really helpful. You know, they're positive, but they're pointing out things where that, you know, something wasn't believable, or this all happened in too much of a rush and I wanted a bit more time to get to know the characters. You know, those sorts of things. Definitely things that I take away and you know, will put in my next piece of work.
So I'm just trying to think which ones I want to ask you, because we're running out of time, and it's like, which ones?
Gosh, that's gone quick, hasn't it?
It has. So I suppose, what are your ambitions for your writing career? Where do you see yourself, for example, in 5 years' time?
I'd like to be a better writer. That's all. I'd like to have the chance to write more books that are read, that are enjoyed, and that I can improve the writing, I can improve the storytelling, that I can play with the structure of the story a bit more. Which I should say, some people hate. Alberto's last birthday, somebody said, I was so confused, I didn't know what was going on and who was doing it. I thought, okay. But then my agent said, you know, you're never going to be everybody's cup of tea. And I think that's an important thing to remember as well.
So we've got a question from Mr. Kane. I think Pippo and Clara would make an amazing Sunday night TV drama. I agree. Would you consider rewriting it as a play script?
This from the man who did all of our Arthur Miller plays with us. I hadn't thought about a play. I think he's right. I think it would suit a play. Yes, I would consider doing that if someone was interested. Alberto's last birthday did have a film offer, but it was the wrong time for us. We were going through adopting our kids and everything, and it was just the wrong time. That producer has said he's still interested, and said that if I was interested, then I would be invited to write the screenplay, which I think is a really good challenge. So maybe going back to you know what you're doing now, that is kind of bubbling in my head as well. Very lucky in that my husband is a filmmaker, and so he's got a really good insight into what works and what doesn't. And he actually said that Hippo and Clara would be too hard to do as a film, whereas Alberto would be a bit easier.
Yeah.
So yes, watch this space. Wouldn't that be great?
Oh goodness, yeah. So a question from Stuart Coe. You touched on audiobooks. How did it feel listening to your work performed by actors? He says, I thought the cast for Pippo and Clara were excellent. Is your agent going to pitch these novels for film or TV dramatizations? They would make epic films.
Thank you. The audiobook, I heard the file just before the book came out, and yeah, I was blown away. They came to me and said, right, we've whittled it down to these actors, and everyone spoke Italian. So I should explain, there's an actor called Bert Seymour who plays Pippo, and Emily Bronte plays Clara. And Emily is Italian, and Bert speaks Italian. So I think that had a real influence on it. And yes, when you hear the voices, it adds another dimension to the story that I, you know, I was just blown away with it, that it really brought it to life. And the fact that I was really surprised, because I thought, oh, well, they'll phone up and have a chat about the characters, and nothing, it happened. And they just got it all. And maybe that's why they don't, because they read it and they take what they think they need to bring out in their performance from it, and they work with that rather than being influenced by me. But no, I loved it. I really loved it, if I can say that. And I got a bit emotional, which really surprised me. We were talking about it, and yeah, towards the end, I really had a bit of a chin wobble.
Oh, fantastic. Well, it's going to be on my list of audiobooks for the next long journey. I'd really like to listen to that one. So we've got a question on punctuation. From John. No, it's not. Did you find the placements of commas, colons, semicolons, dashes, etc. easy? And did your editor make any changes to your punctuation?
Yes. If there's one thing I, wish I'd done better at school, was paying attention in grammar, because it's not my best. And also working in advertising, they're fairly relaxed about the rules in advertising. So long as it sounds like an authentic voice, you can play with grammar. So yes, I'm not great at all of that stuff. And the editor, bless them, does work hard for their money. I have to say, there's not too many changes in terms of story and what I'm actually saying, but some of there's some comma work needs doing. I should just go away and learn it, shouldn't I, before I write anymore? I think I'd learn it as I'm editing, but
Would you say that is the hardest thing about being a writer?
No, the hardest thing is stopping eating biscuits and just sitting down with it.
Yeah, no, I can understand that one. And the easiest thing about being a writer
is the writing. Like I say, when you just sit down and get going, a day disappears, and it's a joy. It really is. It makes me happy to, and because I don't know what's going to happen, and I'm typing away. Oh, she's just said that, so for me, I'm like watching a film. It's like I'm watching a film, writing down what I see, and it's always surprising, and I really like that.
Yeah. I just find it amazing. So you say you just let the writing flow, but you've got a clear ending in mind?
Each chapter, because they're a little bit cliffhangery as well. So it's like, I know, right, I've got to start here, end up here. How am I going to get there? Sometimes I'll think, well, I've got to introduce this character, or I need some sort of technique to, some way of getting in that this happened, historically or whatever. But no, I don't. It always surprises me, because I literally sit down and write. I've got a blank page on my screen, and oh, do you know what? She's going to be sitting there, and she's going to be playing hide and seek, or something like that, and then it just comes.
Fantastic. Oh, it's been so lovely to speak to you, Diana. There's just one last shout out, if anybody has any final questions that they would like to put to Diana in these last few minutes. Let's have a look. We've got a question from Ray. Oh, would you like to give one of our monthly online talks to a local literary society in autumn?
Oh, I certainly would. Thank you, Ray.
Yeah, we can put you in touch with Diana.
I popped into a book club the other night, which was a bit more, wine focused, and that was lovely. That was lovely to. I mean, it was a good sort of dry run for this, but to talk to people about not just my book but other books that they're reading, and one of them I thought had the most really insightful and very interesting observation. They said that all of the people in the book club were only interested at the moment in reading books that had a beginning, middle and an end. She said it's something to do with lockdown, where we just want to see an ending. And I thought, gosh, that's interesting.
Absolutely, yeah. So I know you find your book reviews really, really helpful, and I think one of the things that you wanted to particularly stress tonight was to encourage audience members who had read your books to put reviews on Goodreads, wasn't it, and on retail websites, because you do find it so useful, don't you?
I think all authors do.
Yeah.
If you like something, even if you didn't like it, I try and do it for other writers, especially if I really love something. Then I always make a point of saying it to them, because I know it's always amazing to read stuff like that. But no, like I say, how are we going to get better if we don't get people telling us what we're getting? Not just the commas, but the story or the characters or whatever.
Absolutely. And I know, as Ronnie mentioned at the start, Alberto's lost birthday was actually still is a top-notch title in Shropshire libraries, and so it rotates around all the libraries. It's what is essentially our recommended reads, and once it's gone all the way around the libraries, it will actually become a reading group title. So subscribing reading groups will be able to borrow that soon, and I know we have some reading group members here today. So if you haven't yet read it, you will be able to soon. So it's 2 minutes to 8 o'clock, so I'm going to wrap up now and say a huge thank you to Diana for joining us this evening. Thank you for giving up your precious time to tell us about
You got me out of bedtime with the kids, thank you.
That is precious time. No, but honestly, thank you very, very much, and for being a huge supporter of libraries as well. I'd like to thank all the audience members today who've come to join us. If you want to find out more about Diana and her books, she has her own website, which is dianarosie.co.uk. So do go and have a look there. Of course, in our libraries, we have copies of both of Diana's books. We also have them available on our e-library, and we've got the e-audio version as well that Diana referred to, and I will definitely be borrowing that one soon. And of course, if you'd rather buy a copy of the book, please, don't forget our fantastic independent bookshops that we've got here in Shropshire. They're spread across the county, and they do a fantastic job. So yeah, thank you very much. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you very, very much for joining us all. We hope to bring you another virtual author event soon. Please look out on our social media pages on Twitter and Facebook.